Good morning. My name is Carrie Pilet, and today's topic is going to be relapse prevention and substance abuse recovery. When we talk about substance use and abuse, we have 4 stages of substance users. Well, 5 actually. The first stage I don't count. That's a stage 0, who is somebody that's never used any drugs recreationally. Stage 1 is somebody that is a rare social user. Rare meaning they couldn't even tell you on a given day when the last time they might have had a drink of beer or maybe smoked some pot. I don't consider pain pill users, Xanax users, meth or cocaine users stage 1 users. I think those are just really addictive and we don't stay there for very long. Our stage 2 users are our social users. You may call them heavy. These are people who are using their drug of choice or drugs of choice predictably. So they may go out on every Friday with their friends and have a couple of drinks. They may smoke pot a couple of times a week. They may be recreationally using pain pills, the Oxycontins or the Xanax, or they're doing some meth here and there. Okay, but they have some predictability to it. They could tell you when they do it, whether it's every weekend or a couple of times a month. They would know the last time that they did it. That's a social user. A stage 3 user can also be called an early addict, and it depends what drugs we're talking about here. Stage 3 users are people who use multiple times a week or use to the point of buzz or significant altered state when they use. The exceptions there are going to be our socially acceptable drugs, which is alcohol legal. You can have full-blown, truly alcoholics who are functional, they live life, they pay bills, they work every day, they go home at night and they drink or use until they pass out. They may be using during the day, but they look functional to people. Marijuana also falls in there in my mind because I've met people who smoke all day long. They're not obviously drug monitored people at their job, but they can use during the day multiple times. They use in the evenings, they use on the weekends, and so they use pretty much most of the time. And they, again, work and pay their bills and live functionally and carry on in life. Those can be what I would consider true addicts to their drug, and they live and function in life. I'm seeing more and more pain pill users who are using more regularly and looking at me, and they appear to be functioning in life. They look a little bit different than our alcoholics and our marijuana users because they look a little off and they're a little more spacey in my mind when I see them. Stage 4 users are full-blown addicts, and when we think about this stage of a user, we're thinking more about the illicit, the hardcore drugs. So your heroin addict would be here. Your crack addict would be here. They are not really fitting into society anymore. They are really, really, really focused on drug use, and the money they make is spent for using their drug. Okay, so those are the different types of drug users that are out there. When we talk about recovering and relapse prevention, this class is about social users. I don't have full-blown addicts in this program. That's not what this program is for. And yet we're talking about this topic because as you come and you get more information, and you had to take pause. Somebody has mandated that you get more information and that you stop using for a period of time. It is your time to think about, well, now that I haven't used, or now that I have to think about this, what changes do I want to make? And that's why we address this topic as a part of this program. So now we're going to move to the stage of recovery thing, because there are ways to do that too. Okay, and there are 4 of those. The first stage of recovery is called the Pre Contemplative Stage. And Pre Contemplative means I don't think I have a problem. I am living my life fine. I don't have any issues with what I'm using or how I'm using it. I'm cool. Okay, now, I meet lots of people. Our social users who go out every Friday would fall into that class. Our occasional user, our stage 1 user, would fall into that class because they can't even remember the last time that they use. Okay, our alcoholics still fall into this stage. We only kind of start thinking about it if people start mentioning our use. Hey, you've had a little too much. Hey, slow down. We get a DUI. We get busted for possession. We come to somebody's attention and people start asking us or pointing things out more. That's when we'll say, I don't have a problem, and that's stage 1, pre-contemplative. I don't have a problem. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay? Stage 2 is contemplative. Stage 2 is contemplative. Now, I've thought about it, something's happened, and I'm beginning to look at what's going on and thinking, well, maybe I am a little out of where I thought I was with this. I see that with my social users who will say, I used to just go out and smoke on weekends with my friends, and now, I buy my own marijuana and I'm smoking a couple times during the week. Well, that's not where they started, and as they start looking at their pattern of use, they can identify that they've picked up and say, well, maybe this really isn't in my best interest. The same thing happens with alcohol. Maybe it isn't such a good idea to drink every night. I do get some of the pain pill people who say, maybe I do need to stop using this if they're using recreationally, or if they're coming through a pain clinic, now they're back talking to their doctor who's prescribing this stuff for them, saying, I don't want to be on all this. I need to get off of all this, or at least some of it. So this is where we begin to say, maybe I do need to change what I'm doing and take some action here because what I'm doing is not beneficial for me. Stage 3 is that place where now I am ready. I do believe I need to make some changes, and I'm going to do that. That's called the action stage. Stage 3 is the action stage. Now I have decided I need to make some changes, and I have put together in my mind or on a piece of paper, if you're a writer-downer, how I'm going to affect change, what I'm going to do different, how I'm going to make that happen. Okay? As we lay out a plan, you have to think about where I used, when I used, who I used with, what was my pattern, what happens if I get stressed, what happens if I go hang out with my best friend who I always used to smoke with. Those are the things you have to take into account as you're sitting down and saying, I need to do something different. Because these are the times in your life you're looking at your habit. My pattern of use, what did it look like? Because then I know where I need to maybe make some changes to help myself not do this. Let me tell you, one of the things people think is that if you have the willpower to stop, that's all you need. That is not true. If willpower was all it took, we'd have a lot fewer stage 4 people. Because here, they don't want to use anymore. A lot of them know that it's not good for them and that they're killing themselves. And they know here, and their pattern is set in, and they have no way in their mind to get out of where they are. And so they continue to use. Stage 4 of recovery is called maintenance. Maintenance. This is the person who's worked through stages 1, 2, and 3, has an action plan, has affected the change. They have done the things that they set out to do. They have fixed hanging out with their best friend and smoking. They have fixed changing the pattern for when they used to go and do this. They have stayed away from the places where they used to use. Okay? And so now they find that they are either not using like they intended, or if they've decided they can still be a social user, they're using with thought and choice every time they decide to go have a drink or every time they decide to go smoke. Okay? Maintenance is where a lot of people, when we talk about this idea of relapse, maintenance and action are where this occur. This relapse kind of a thing. Because we have the willpower, I want to do it. I have a plan. Okay? Sometimes we haven't worked all the way through our plan, and so something happens, or we run into someone that maybe we haven't seen for a while or didn't identify as a risk for us, and so we go out and we use again. Okay? Now, most people would call that a relapse. And this is where I've got to straighten this out, because there is relapse, but there's also something called lapse, and there's a big difference between these two things. Okay? A lapse is a one-time occurrence with return to use. So this would be where, oh my gosh, I see you at the supermarket, and you say, hey, why don't we catch up on times, and we go over here to Chili's, and as we're sitting there, we both order a beer, and I'm not drinking anymore. Okay, and I have 2, and I kind of have a buzz, and I'm waiting until I'm recovered until I can leave, and I don't drink anymore, and I'm like, gosh darn it, I don't do this, and I can't believe this happened. Okay, a lapse is when I make a one-time choice or this choice and use and say, crap, this is not what I want to do, and I return to my previous action plan. I go back and I tweak it. Hey, I have to be careful around this person if they're going to be in my life because they're one of these people that I used to use with, and look the choice I made. So I'm going to now tweak my plan. That's called a lapse. A lapse is when it is a one-time deal with a return to my new patterns of not using. A relapse is when I go out with my buddy and as I use, now we make a date to go fishing and we bring beer on the fishing trip, and now I'm getting back into my previous old pattern of using, and I'm quickly back into my old predictable ways with my old crowd doing the same thing. That's a relapse. A return to previous pattern is a relapse. Okay, so there's a big difference between lapse and relapse. One is, you would call it a slip. I fell off the wagon and I got back on the wagon. A relapse is I fell off the wagon and I waved goodbye as it pulled away. Did not attempt to re-engage with my not using patterns. Okay, so how do we, what do we do? I get people who have a good action plan. They really don't want to use. They've got that willpower. They've had a lapse. They're very down on themselves. We get very hard on ourselves when we screw up and think that it's over. I really can't do this. And this is where I want to talk to you about things like coping and adapting, because these also play into what's going on with us. My definition of coping is a short-term fix to relieve mental pain, mental anxiety, mental worry, okay, mental pain. So if I use this example, I had a bad day. I've decided I don't drink anymore, and I haven't had a drink in a long time. I have a really bad day, and you invite me to the bar after work to hang out with some old friends, and you say, I know you don't drink, but just come hang out with us. You don't have to drink. So I go to the bar with the intention not to drink. I call that coping. It's white knuckling. I want to be with my friends who are over there doing that, and I've said I won't do it. That's white knuckling. I think I can be around it. I think I can be around it and not do it. Okay? That is really, really hard. Do I meet people that do that? Absolutely. Do I think they're at risk to go into lapse and relapse? High risk, because they have a plan that includes being in the same environment. They have a plan that includes their old pattern, but I'm just not going to use. That's really, really hard to do for the long term, and most people don't do it for the long term. Once they're there, all it takes is that really bad day or that someone who isn't okay that I'm not using, and I say, you know what, it's easier just to do it than to put up with this crap, and so I use one time. Is that going to be a lapse or a relapse? The person has to make the decision. Adapting is when I put into place that action plan. And adapting, my definition is to make permanent change so that I remove use from my life. Adapting is making a permanent change so that I remove use from my life. Okay? Now, you may say, but then that means I won't have any friends. That's not necessarily the case. When you have friends, you have them right now. You have friends that do things that you don't agree with. And so when they want to do something you don't want to do, you don't go buy them. Same thing applies when they want to drink or use drugs and you've decided I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to go buy you at this time because you're going to choose to do that and I don't want to do that. Okay? Now your friend may not be okay with that, huh? And then I may have to make a choice about should I keep this friend in my life, but that's a different issue. Adapting is when I, for me, make decisions about what I'm going to do to live the way I want to live without my drug, without using like I was using in the past. So you take into account who are the people that I used with. We were talking about that a little bit ago. Where are the places that I tended to use? You have to also be careful about going by the places where maybe you used to go by. When I find people who, I do it when I go to Publix to buy groceries, and if I'm short on milk, I'll make a mental note to myself that, hey, I need milk, and then I don't have to think about it anymore. And as I go by the Publix, I'm already pulling in, not even thinking about, oh, I need milk. Well, you know what? When you go by the 7-Eleven on your way home, and that's where you used to buy your six-pack, you'll find your little car pulling into the 7-Eleven parking lot to go get your six-pack, even though you don't drink anymore. Those are the kinds of things you have to think about. I may have to change my route home to avoid going by there so that I don't pull in and go, well, while I'm here. Those are the things you have to think about in your plan. That's part of this adaptive thing. Making permanent change to limit or stop a pattern that I didn't like and replacing it with something else. You do have to replace it with something else. So what are you going to do with all this extra money? We were pricing that out a while ago. We were pricing out how much people are spending. I mean, even if you just use cigarettes and you smoke a pack a day, 30 times 7 I smoke the good stuff. 30 times 7 is $200 a month on cigarettes. Well, if I quit smoking cigarettes, I got $200 a month I didn't have before. What am I going to do with that $200 a month? If you make no plan, it'll simply get absorbed by McDonald's or by the toll or by, more bills come up, and you haven't even consciously said, here's what I'm going to do with that money. But we feel good when we say, here's what I can do with that money. Here's what I'm going to choose to do with this extra thing I've got. You can do the same thing when you leave this class. I think most of you will probably go back to sleeping for your hour and a half. I really do, because it's an early group. However, what will you do with this hour? You can let life fill it in for you, or you can make a choice about, here's what I want to do with this hour of the life that I have. I tell all my groups that. What are you going to do with the hour? Because you had to carve this out. You didn't have a choice. Somebody told you had to, so you did. So what are you going to do with it when you're done? You finally pushed back and made some time for yourself. And what are you going to do with this time when nobody's forcing you to keep it for yourself? So those are the things you have to think about for adapting. So what we've been talking about is recovery and relapse prevention. We've talked about the stages of addiction, 5 of them, the 4 stages of recovery, what lapse and relapse are, and the difference between them, and how coping and adapting fit into relapse prevention. My name is Pilet. Thank you for watching.